Hello and welcome to On to the Next Project. I'm Adam Krutinger.
And I'm Brian Miller.
And on this show, Brian and I have a weekly free-form conversation about building a living and a life with your passion.
And this week's topic is therapy for Adam because apparently something has gone awry today and he wants to work it out, which is actually kind of what the original conception of this show was that we've really never done, which is working things out in real time that we're actually going through and having the conversation. So why don't you try to explain what today's topic actually is? What happened?
Sure, yeah, just I'm not traumatized by this. I'm not going to let it slow me down or stop me. But I thought I'd share it to be showing a little bit of vulnerability about it. Is that I did a recording for a podcast today that I was really excited about. I thought it'd be like one of my best ones, and I was just completely thrown off. Now, being thrown off wasn't my fault, but however, I don't think I didn't bring myself back together in order to make it the best show it possibly could have. And I think I am being a little hard on myself. I think people would like it and get value from it. I just wasn't up to my own personal what I wanted it to be and what I thought it could be.
So, having gone through similar feelings, because totally hear that in your voice right now. I've had, especially when now I don't know who this guest was that you have, but like I have had people that I was really excited for that I was just like, oh man, this is one of like the guests, like one of the people I am so excited to talk to. And then I've made this call to you afterwards and gone, that interview that I talked about for the last 3 months I was excited for, I just did it, and I'm just not sure I really got what I was hoping for. What aspect, do you think didn't go as well? Do you think was it, like, the content? Was it, like, the energy, the rhythm? What did you guys just not gel or get into, like, a routine? What happened?
I think we definitely gelled. I definitely was just I felt rushed because we were running very, very late, due to some technical difficulties, which happens. But and then I just felt rushed, and I shouldn't have because there's doesn't matter, right? We were half hour. It was a live video scheduled for a certain time, and we were half hour late. And I felt rushed, even though there's probably nobody waiting for it. But I just felt like we had to get what I really should have just collected myself. And it's again, it wasn't that bad. It just started off definitely rushed. And because of that, it was very scattered. And then since it started off scattered, as we went on throughout it, I kept going back to different things. And it just,
Mm.
usually you try to have some sort of form to the conversation, even if it's not necessarily going somewhere, you try to block off, you know, topics in some way. And I just felt like we were kind of all over the place. But since it's a show for artists anyway, maybe they'll relate to it well.
Okay, so this is interesting. So I didn't realize you were talking about a live stream podcast.
Yeah.
So live changes how I was thinking about it because my instinct was going to be if it was a normal recorded podcast, if you get 15 minutes in and you realize, boy, this is just not happening, you can totally stop, right? You can say to your guest, hey, time out. I'm going to stop recording. I think you and I we can have a better conversation than we're currently having, and I'd like to start over if that's okay with you. And throwing it on we or even on yourself and say, listen, even if you think it's their fault, right? You could always stop and say, listen, I feel like I'm not really conducting this conversation in a way that would be beneficial to both of us and to our audiences. So do you mind if we start over and just kind of try that again? That was just a trial run. You can do that when it's recorded, but live, that's a much trickier thing to dance around. You have to, especially with the amount of things, as you and I have been talking about a lot lately. We're both running a lot of live streams lately, and boy, oh boy, is there a lot of stuff that you don't realize the host of a live stream is dealing with in their head all at the same time. Is that part of what happened?
Yeah, that was definitely a little part of it. Yeah, I just know what it was. I was just in my head, and I usually don't have a problem with that. But I just, it just happened, and at a certain point, I definitely just like go. Well, I was like, well, this is kind of a mess, but let's just. I'm just gonna lay back and relax. And it got a little bit better then. but then again, I remembered things I wanted to say in the beginning that I brought up at the end. That was just like, but again, whatever. It was fine. But I just more so than anything, rather than regretting on what happened, I want to do everything I can to make sure that that hopefully doesn't happen again. That's my biggest thing, and why I wanted to bring it up today.
So that's really interesting. Okay, so let me ask this then. If you actually could do it over, have you already thought of things that you go, well, I wish this is what I had done in that moment instead or whatever. Have you already thought of things like that?
Yeah, I think so. But really, I can honestly, if I just had a better restart of the lawnmower, I think with just a sharper start, or just honestly, just even taking a deep breath. I had this urgency running through me to just go, 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 go. And I need to ignore that instinct because again, it's not a problem I normally have to do that. I'm usually the one to be all right. There's no rush. We're just gonna move on. And, I did not do that today.
You know, what I'm thinking about now is that all the years that I was a full-time magician and less so now as a speaker, but as a magician, and I was in markets where I didn't get to fly in days early and get comfortable and get set up. I would have, be at the airport at 4 a.m. and then have a first flight and then a layover and then a second flight, then have to get the rental car and my bags and drive 2 hours. And then it was like this insane. And then the show was that night. And so it was this like 18 hours of insanity in one day leading up to the actual show. And I can't believe how long I did that lifestyle. And I remember so many times where after that entire day of travel, then the stage crew, for some reason, hadn't read the contract or paid attention. So they didn't have a piece of gear that they were supposed to have for me or the wrong type of mic. And then I had to deal with that and try to keep the smile on. Like, I don't want to upset them because I don't want them to complain to my management or the client. Right. And like, no, it's okay. But really, I do need you to and you can get so frazzled. And I remember that the best thing that anybody ever told me, like advice for those moments, is when I was backstage, finally about to be introduced, no matter how frazzled you are or what's in your brain, first, that deep breath. This sounds like such stupid, obvious advice, but
I know, right?
that like big, like diaphragm breath. And then the other thing was literally I was taught as a stage performer to breathe in and then hold it where your chest is like up here, where you've got that Superman pose, and walk out and start with that breath held. Because as you walk on into the stage, you actually feel powerful with that air up in your chest like that. And I wonder if something as simple as that right before you go live on the internet is similar. If you could just, you're about to hit the live button, or even if you've already hit it and you've got those couple of seconds while you're waiting for it to actually click in and be
That's the
live.
worst. Those 3 seconds are the worst 3 seconds of any streamer's life, I think, because and it makes it hard to even do what you're saying because you're like, then you'd be holding your breath too long sometimes, and it's just that, like and then also if you're late too, it's like, "Oh, man, I was too late," and that's in your head too, so I don't know, we should get off that. That's
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I don't know. I do think there's something to be said for that, though, is that having that just split second or 1 second that you clear everything, or this kind of old piece of wisdom, which is right before you do the thing for the audience, right? So whether it's on stage or a live stream, right before it, you just in your head you do a quick moment of gratitude, I'm really grateful that there's people about to watch this or that they're interested in what I have to say, or I like to remind yourself in your head that you're here for them. It's amazing, or for the guest, right? um it's a great thing to be able to center yourself real quick. But let's say you weren't able to do that. You started, you're frazzled. That happens sometimes, right? You're just not ready, no matter how much time you had to prepare.
Mhm.
And because I've felt unprepared for the beginning of things that I had no excuse not to be ready for. I wasn't running around. I had 3 days with nothing on my calendar. I could have been ready, and for some reason, I just wasn't in my head. What do you do then if you're going that first 5, 6, 8 minutes and you're like, this just isn't going the way that I hoped? What do you do then? Because we're trying to work this out for the future now, not
Yeah, and again,
fix the
like you
past.
said, it being live is the biggest obstacle for that, and that's where I would say it's hardest to do because there's no way to. Because I think the key to being able to restart it is to acknowledge it, and not just for yourself, but also for the guests, so they're aware of what's going on and kind of why you're restarting. Maybe I just got to think through a good way to do that live that is relatable to the audience and isn't off-putting to the guests to make them, because at the end of the day too, as much as we want this to be good for us too. More than anything, I want it to be good and something that the guest is proud of. And even the idea of doing something like that in the middle of something live makes it seem like something that they wouldn't be proud of or want to share or have as a part of the body of their work.
So I wonder if the way to do it is actually kind of what we're dancing around at the beginning of this, which is even if you are live, you just take it fully on yourself as the host because that's your responsibility, no matter whose fault it is, whether it's yours or theirs. And you could say, you could literally, as they wrap up their current thought, instead of asking a follow-up question, you could go, all right. So here's the thing. I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job of asking you the right questions in the right order right now. So let's go back for a second because I want to make sure you have a chance to really tell your story properly.
Yeah.
And then you can ask the first question you meant to ask, which hopefully you have on your notes anyway. I
Yes.
wonder if that's the answer.
No, I think that is the answer too, and then hopefully, me go being willing to think about this in this way is gonna make that easier for me to do rather than of just coming to it myself. But yeah, I think that is the answer, and that's the one thing with the lives too is I can at least usually you can trim the ends without it seeming too unusual. That's at least for a replay, you know.
That's
And I
true.
think I think the people who are live with you would be not only empathize with that, but they may even probably appreciate it because chances are no one likes to go, you know, they're rooting for us.
Honest.
No one pays money to see a show. Not even that this is paid thing, but no one pays with their time for something, hoping it's going to be bad.
So that reminds me of two different live shows that I've seen so one was Bon Jovi and the other was Brian Regan, who's a comedian. And these seem unrelated, but let me give you this. I haven't thought about this in a long time. So in high school, I got to see Bon Jovi for the first time, and so excited. 20,000 seat arena, just incredible, right? One of the last 80s hair metal bands that were still kicking at that point. And I was a huge fan. And the concert was technically perfect. The band never missed a note in 2 hours. It was unbelievable. And it's one of the least memorable concerts I've ever seen. And the reason it's so unmemorable is because the band was so perfect, it may as well have been the record. They may as well have been lip syncing. There was nothing special about the concert. I could have stayed home and listened to the album. Nothing happened that I didn't have on the album. Meanwhile, on the other hand, 7, 8 years after that, saw Brian Regan, one of my favorite comedians of all time, in concert with Lindsay, with my wife, and in the middle of the show, he's doing this bit, and we've been laughing. The whole audience has been in tears, hysterical for 30 minutes. And then out of nowhere, he's 5 minutes into a story that hasn't had one laugh. I mean, this place was silent for 5 minutes of live comedy out of nowhere. And finally, he stops in the middle of a sentence and he goes, all right, folks, let me explain what's going on right now. And he just turns to the audience. He goes, so this is a new bit that I've been working out, and as you can see, it's not working. and and
Yeah,
and the audience just lost it.
yeah,
And he goes, "Now let me explain what's been going on in my head." And then he made this hysterical bit off the cuff about this conversation he was having with himself in his head. Well, you've been trying this new bit. If you bail out now, it's going to be obvious that it wasn't working. So you may as well power through it and hope that they laugh. No, but they're still not laughing, and you can't just keep doing it if they're not laughing. And it was the funniest. I will never forget that show because of the one thing that went wrong.
yeah. And you know
Live,
what?
yeah,
That's why you watch something live for those
exactly.
moments. Otherwise, you just watch the DVD because that's not going to be in the DVD. You
Right,
know?
of course
Yeah,
not. Right, of course. And that when something happens that's a little off, that the joke doesn't land, or that you have to restart or say, or and even what's happening right now in the world with everybody having Zoom calls for their for their work, where like the everybody's favorite moment in a Zoom call for their work right now is when someone's kid, 3-year-old, wanders into the screen and says something silly.
It's
That's
the most enjoyable
everybody's
part.
favorite moment.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely too. And I guess one thing I'm taking away from myself and reflecting on this, and I guess maybe the one thing I'm maybe proud of myself for is that I'm really trying to see what I could have done different because to be perfectly not to throw the person under the bus, but like I was thrown off because of them being like really late and not only late but really like we're planning to do a test thing like 45 minutes before and I said yeah I'm ready and we're here waiting and then I waited and he never came on and then time came that we were supposed to be live and that went it was a half hour past that I was sitting there for almost an hour in front of a camera just waiting and getting slowly building up like an anxiety as it got closer and closer and closer and then by the time he even came on it was like we didn't even I don't know if his audio is going to be good I'm like we gotta go so I was so in my head and obviously I wish that didn't happen on their end. But I what anyone should ever do is focus on the things you can control. And what I could control and should have done is like when we finally got connected, just start fresh, my normal thing, my normal, you know, uh, uh, you know, talk about pre-show talk about
Mhm.
what to expect, what to do. Here are the overlays, this, that, and the other. And I didn't. I just was like, we got to start now. And then it just threw off my whole rhythm. And yeah, I didn't control the one thing that I had control of.
So this is interesting. I agree with everything you just said, except you and I are a little different in terms of so time. Being on time is like one of my biggest pet peeves. I have no tolerance for lateness. Like, I just have I have n I am it's one of the very few things that I really come down hard on. I get very 'cause I view it as incredibly unprofessional, and on top of that, I view it as incredibly disrespectful. When somebody is late to a meeting, that we've scheduled, it makes me feel like they think their time's more valuable than mine, right?
Mhm,
Which just and it doesn't matter. I don't know if you and I were talking about this, or somebody else I was talking about this with recently, but they were saying what you have to remember is even when you have a famous, quote unquote, famous guest on your podcast, your time is just as valuable as theirs. Like,
yep,
as a host, you always feel the need to thank them so much for their time, but you're also giving them your time. Time is time, and everybody's time is just as valuable as anybody else's. And so, honestly, if I were in your shoes, and I've been in your shoes with meetings, with appointments, with events before, um, basically, at the point where we were going to be running late, because that's a promise that you've made to your audience, so their time, now you're not respecting by not going live. I might have actually called it. I might have gone live by myself and said, "Hey, folks, it turns out that, we need to reschedule this. I really appreciate you all being here. I'm happy to hang out for 15, 20 minutes to take any questions you have, and we're gonna
mhm.
reschedule today's guest. Something came up." You don't have to throw them under the bus, but I might have just called it and said, "No, this isn't I'm not gonna go 30 minutes late and disrespect the people who are waiting for this live."
Yeah, no, no. I mean, that definitely would have been another option too. And I agree with everything you're saying, but I generally have a different outlook on it. Is that when someone is late, I always assume the best in people. I assume it was for circumstances out of anyone's control because I try not to be late to anything too, but it does happen. And it's never malicious intent of some sort that I am trying to be late and I know that feeling usually. If I am late to something, I have a pit in my stomach and I hate it. And if the guest comes in with that, I would want to diffuse that right away so it wouldn't hinder the conversation. So I always, try to be very I am very forgiving, maybe too much, as you're saying, for those types of circumstances. But you're right, that would have been another option other than just myself taking a breath too and recentering.
Yeah, and like I said, you can assume the best, and first of all, though, in the world we live in, right, all it would have taken if they really had I got into an accident or something crazy happened, right? They could have texted you like some, it would have taken a second to actually say, hey, like got into an accident, like I'm going to be late, or this crazy thing, my kid's screaming, I'm going to be late, whatever. It would take a second to do that, like 30 minutes or an hour, like they were supposed to be there 30 minutes before. An hour late is not an hour late. It's just that's nothing. I mean, that's not late is 10 minutes, right? Late is, oh crap, something came up at the very last second as I was trying to walk to my computer,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
10 minutes. That's not so even if you're assuming the best, you can still say to your audience, because this might be a slightly different topic, but I think it's worth saying here. You have a professional responsibility to your audience, to their time, and it's none of their concern why anything's happening for you. If you're right as a performer, as a host, as a whatever, you have a cold, you just got in a fight with your spouse, you got bad news in the medical news in the family, you can cancel and give a good reason for it. But if you're not going to cancel, they don't it shouldn't it's not the audience's responsibility to care about what's going on in your life, right? Like that is how I feel, because that's how I feel when I'm an audience member.
Yeah. No, no, same thing, same philosophy I use for my teaching too. Like if I have a bad day, I don't show that in my classroom with my elementary students. Like I put on a happy no matter what happened, I put on a happy face and it's funny, Mr. Krutinger, because they they don't need to be uh, affected by that as well, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, that's making me think of the authenticity conversation we had,
Mm,
authenticity on the internet. Is that your authentic self if you found out some really bad news earlier and you're upset, but you still put on a happy face? And I say the answer is yes, that is authentic, because you're being authentic to the role in which you made that promise to that particular group of people.
yeah.
So, yeah, I like I said, there's no reason to throw someone under the bus, or publicly
Mhm.
or anything, but man, there obviously, I totally get how it happened for you today, and you just went, "All right, we gotta go." But in the future, I feel like there's at least 3 or 4 different ways out of that could be better. So good learning moment for sure.
Yeah, and you know, that's why I really have to think about it as be glad that this happened and use it as yeah, as a frame of reference to of different ways. I did have multiple options that I could have and probably should have done, and maybe I'm better for persevering through it this time to make it a better show in the future with other guests.
And you
Yeah.
never know, because as you said at the beginning, maybe you're just your own worst critic. Of course you are. I'm my own worst
Mhm.
critic, except for maybe you. But I think you might be my worst critic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but that I, I have had shows and speeches and programs and stuff where I'm just came away going, "Ugh, that just wasn't that good," and then had people come up and just the client was thrilled, the audience was obsessed, they whatever. I've had episodes of the podcast that I told you I didn't think went as well as they it could have been, and then you thought it was one of the best episodes, or somebody I got a million emails for that one, and
Yeah.
so it's hard to
I agree
know.
with that 100,000%. And but one thing I always have to also remind myself is I think one fear that I have is you don't wanna use that as an excuse for when you do bad work though,
No,
you know?
no,
So
it's
it's
always
there's
my fault.
yes, of
Yeah.
course, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, and then I guess that's just one thing, yeah, again, I just yeah, just again, I even before we started this conversation, I had moved on, like, I
Yeah.
am over it, but again, I just wanna make sure I do everything I can in the future to prevent that, and so I'm glad we kinda talked through it.
Yeah, and that's the only way forward through for things like this, and that's the only way you get really good at anything, and this is missed so often in the quick fix messaging that's all over the internet, and the, 3 quick ways to do this and 10 best practices for that. And what you'd miss in all that stuff is just, at the end of the day, 95% of getting good at something is just doing it a lot for a long time. It's just doing it over and over and over again, because you could know all the best practices, but even if you've already done, what have you done? 50 podcasts and a bajillion live streams. This is the first time you've hit this particular specific problem. And it's only the fact that you've done it so many times that you've discovered all the different things that can go wrong along the way. And you're still
Yeah.
discovering things that can go
Yeah,
wrong.
and again, and that's also probably why I think I'm more okay with it, though I do wish it was better, is because even though, I mean, this Maker Art, Maker Chat Live podcast that I'm doing is to meet new people, to learn about other industries as far as being creative industries. But I do know as well, another whole piece to why I'm doing this is to practice and get used to being a host by myself in a live show. And it's like practicing improv. There's no way to practice it other than just doing it. And sometimes you're going to fall on your face, you know? And that
Honestly,
is usually what makes you stronger.
it definitely, falling on your face is absolutely what makes you stronger, right? It's just, it's you just do whatever you have to do to keep moving forward. But I'm just laughing now thinking about the monumental achievement, because the other side of this is when you make it through something like that that's really hard and you really nail it. The times you nail it, you're just on cloud nine, right? Because, man, the other day when I hosted the panel discussion that we did, the live stream for K through 12, future of K through 12, whatever, and had the three of you on, and I was acting truly as a host, and I was doing it with the three of you as panelists. So I wasn't really there to provide my own opinion apart from little prompts here and there. For me, managing the three of you plus me, the live stream, the comments, pre-organized questions, making sure everybody got an equal amount of time roughly to speak, the technology, soloing and bringing us back to the group, and all those different things at once. And it was not flawless, but pretty close, all things considered. And at the end of it, when we stopped being live and I hit that button, I had this like monumental sense of achievement, even though that's hardly the scariest thing I've ever done in my
Oh yeah.
life. I've done much scarier, much crazier things than that as a speaker.
Oh, yeah, it's
But
not
yeah,
about, being how crazy it is. I think it's just a matter of going into the unknown. It's like something about, like, I'm not afraid to go into the pool or the bathtub, but dark water is scary, you know?
yeah. If you can't see what's underneath, yeah, that's
And
true. So
maybe that's a topic for a future, podcast of, like, and this is kinda general, I guess, but how to prepare for something you can't prepare for, or how to prepare for what you don't know is coming. So,
I'm
because
writing that
because here's the
down.
yeah, because you can't do nothing in preparation. There's always something you can do in some way, but you just don't never know what's the right thing. But you know you shouldn't do nothing. Let's save it.
I'm just writing it down because of how often you and I have something that comes up during a conversation. We go, that would be a great topic. And then neither of us feels like rewatching these to go back and find the 12 seconds that we said that thing. So I'm writing it down.
Good, good. Yeah, yeah. Well, then people have something to look forward to next week.
Absolutely. Well, I think this might have been a short and sweet one, but I think we covered all the ground here that we're gonna cover on this. So yeah, what do you think? We're good? Good
Yeah,
here?
I think it's symbolic for us to just move on from this topic.
Although we do want to say, and you and I have forgotten every single time to say this at the beginning of the episode, but
Yeah. We said we were gonna
the
say at the beginning. Yeah.
the face that you just made was just all of my anguish right now. So what we meant to say at the beginning was, if you have experienced anything like this, we'd like to hear your story. So definitely go into the comments and let us know. Have you had a moment where something really didn't go like you planned, but you ended up learning a lot about it? For next time, we want to know what happened, what you learned, and did it go better next time? So definitely let us know about that. And yeah, until then,
On to
on
the
to the
next
next
pod.
project.